words of hope, proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ in the languages of the world's peoples.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping.
We are looking at what Ezekiel continues to speak to us about shepherding. We looked at Psalms 23, and David looks at God as his shepherd. He says, "The Lord is my shepherd." Now we are deeply going to see how God cares deeply about his sheep. As a shepherd, he is so concerned about his sheep, his flock. I'm reading Ezekiel chapter 34, verses 1 all through to verses 24. And if you have the Bible, will you please stand with me? The word of the Lord came to me, "Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to the shepherds of Israel who only take care of themselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourself with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays or searched the lost. You have ruled over them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd. And when they were scattered, they became food for all wild animals. My sheep wandered over all the mountains and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched to look for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because my flock lacks a shepherd, and so has been plundered and has become food for all wild animals, and because my shepherds did not search for my flock, but care for themselves rather than for the flock. Therefore, O shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against the shepherds, and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouth, and it will no longer be food for them. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself will search for my sheep and look after them, as a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them. So will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they have been scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I'll bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries. I will bring them back into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountain of Israel, in the ravines, and in all settlements in the land. I will tend them in a good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind the injured and strengthen the weak. But the sleek and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd my flock with justice. As for you, my flock, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will judge between one sheep and another, and between rams and goats. Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture? Must you also trample the rest of your pasture with your feet? Is it not enough for you to drink clear water? Must you also muddy the rest with your feet? Must my flock feed on what you have trampled and drink what you have muddied with your feet? Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says to them. See, I myself will judge between the fat sheep and the lean sheep. Because you have shopped with flank and shoulder, butting all the weak sheep with your horns until you have driven them away. I will save my flock, and they will no longer be plundered. I will judge between one sheep and another. I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend my sheep. He will tend them and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. The word of the Lord is clear without any doubt, any shadow of doubt. And the first point I want to make is this, that God calls leaders himself. There is no leadership that comes from our own creation. God is the one who calls every leader, no matter how high or no matter how low, no matter how many millions of people follow you or a few people follow you. You are a leader. God has called you. But in Israel, Ezekiel is recording that God himself was very sad about bad leadership. Bad leadership. Look at verse 2. He's telling us something about this kind of thing. He said, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to the shepherds of Israel who only take care of themselves. A bad leader is self-centered, self-concerned, and all he thinks about is himself. And the leadership at the point Ezekiel was prophesying was so self-centered, were only thinking about their stomachs, about how well they live, and about how life can be for themselves. What happened to the sheep? They were hungry. They could not be fed properly. And because they were hungry, they were malnourished. And because they were malnourished, they were too weak for anything. Why? Because in verse 3, he continues to say, you eat the curds, clothe yourself with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You are only zeroing on eating what the animals produce. You are killing and eating the meat of the animals, clothing themselves during the cold time, and you are putting on woolen clothing made from the wool from the animals, but you are not feeding my animals. My animals are struggling. Nobody is caring for them. They are weak. They are malnourished. Now, this is a predicament. Why? Because when you are chosen as a leader, your concern is to the person who chose you. And then your responsibility and accountability is to the flock that follow you. The people who are supposed to be guided by you as a shepherd and help to go and live well and eat well and be happy, you are not concerned about them. Instead, they are scattered and they have become food for other scavengers, enemies that destroy them at will, and it looks like the shepherds are not caring at all. The shepherds have lost the idea of responsibility, stewardship. Look at verse 5 and 6. The Lord is concerned here. They are scattered because there is no shepherd. And when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep wandered all over the mountains and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. The shepherd is so concerned about himself that the animals have to look for food on their own. Now, I want you to understand, sheep are not the kind of intelligent animals you think they are. No, they are not. They can wander in places and they can fall in pits. They can go and fall in cliffs if nobody is attending to them. That's why the Bible will explain that human beings are in the same way. Well, our minds may be better, our understanding may be better, but often our selfish nature takes us to self-destruction. We do things where we destroy ourselves. And sheep are like that. God Jehovah is so concerned because there are no shepherds, no somebody to guide and to lead and to teach and to help. The animals have wandered. They have become food for wild animals and they're killed at will. And you know how sheep can panic. They see a dog, they're panicking. They run in any direction and they can injure themselves quite easily. They're scattered all over the place. In fact, the Lord is saying, my people are scattered all over the world. All over the world, looking for refuge, for somewhere they can be, where they can be safe, where they can eat, where they can take shelter. They're all over the place. But now, because they're all over the place, the shepherd is not even concerned to go and find out where they are. He cannot go and look for them. Too much in self-indulgence to feed and enjoy himself. What a predicament. What a punishment. What a judgment we are looking at here on shepherds who care nothing about the flock of God and let them go and be victimized. Let me give you my second point. In verse 8, the Lord is surely disappointed. God is disappointed with leadership of Israel at the time. Before I go that far, May I also mention at this point, if you're a leader, is God happy with you, or is God disappointed with your performance? Are you self-centered, or are you people-centered? You care for them, you think for them, you help them to think with you, and you are guiding them where they are supposed to be. You are a leader. I am a leader. We are leaders. Our sole responsibility should be people-centered. Not because of pride, but because we know it is our responsibility. Look at verse 8. This is what God is saying. Surely as I live, declares the Lord sovereign, because my flock lacks a shepherd, and so have been plundered and become food for all the wild animals. And because my shepherds did not search for my flock, but cared for themselves rather than for my flock, therefore, O shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. Now God is disappointed. The sheep have become food for wild animals. The shepherds are not bothered. They are rejoicing, enjoying, relaxing instead of working. God said in verse 11, I myself will search for my flock and look after them. I will take over. I will push you aside. I will remove my authority from you. I will take my responsibility out of your hands, and I'll go looking for my own. I will go as a shepherd to my people. I am against you. I go back to verse 10. He said, I am against you, and I hold you accountable for my flock. My dear beloved, if you're a leader, there is something about leadership that is just more than the pride, the pomp, the enjoyment, the exhilarating experience of when people praise you and stuff like that. No, there is accountability. There is somewhere where we are responsible, and God watches that very carefully and makes sure that we do what we are supposed to do. In verse 10, he said, you are accountable for my flock, and because you have not been accountable, I will remove you from tending my flock. I will take you away. And you know, it is true. Even today, it's very possible that you can be a very important leader for a very important post, and God has given you that. But you are not doing it according to his will. God removes that authority from you. Because I told you earlier on, every leadership is from the Lord. Now, when God removes authority from you, he exposes you to the enemies of the people. The enemies that you should be defending your people from, they now become your sole enemy. Now, you don't have the authority. You don't even have God's cover over you. Those enemies will not only stop at your people, they'll even come to you and they will